if everybody could please take their seats and be quiet. Thank you. Welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of Wednesday, June 27th, 2018. I'm Councilman Mike Bonin, joined by Councilwoman Nuri Martinez, and we are going to begin. I'm going to begin with my first and only warning for Mr. Spindler and Mr. Herman that if there's any disruptions, you will be out. I am then going to proceed to those who have multiple public comment cards, which would be Mr. Herman, Mr. Spindler, Mr. Previn, and Ms. Ramirez. You can each have a total of 3 minutes, 2 minutes for the items on the agenda, so just do 2, and then 1 afterwards for general public comment.
Item number 1, fuck the state mobility of pedestrians, cyclists. Item number 2, fuck item number 2, Nuri. Then I go to item number 6, Tahunga, Magnolia, and Victory, for prostitution of CD6, and we experienced the Metropolitan meeting that night. Item number 6, Pussy Loser. Item number 7, Dick. Item number 8, Cunt Englander. Then I go to item number 12, so we have 24 items. Fat, bald, fuck, Englander, and Weezer, if you take a look at their heads. Then you go to item 13, TN. What the fuck's TN? Oh, transportation nigger. That's 13. Item number 12. No, 14. That's Jose Weezer, but this is CD11. Transportation nigger 2. 15, transportation nigger. And then you get to the final end of all this, which is item 17. I'm not done. Weezer, PDD. What? Establishing preferential parking district? Fuck you. We want our parking, we're homeless, and we're gonna keep it. Last item, 24. Dickless, Los Angeles Department of Transportation, Dickless report relative to dockless, dickless, on-demand, dickless personal mobility of dick service, including cocksucker, on-demand personal mobility rules, dick cocksuck, also referred to as Bonin. General public comment, sir. Lozman versus City of Rivera Beach. What is Lozman? Lozman? What is it? It's First Amendment. It's dealing with the City of Rivera Beach. In what? Intimidation and retaliation. General public comment, sir.
The clock has not been set.
What?
When the clock is set for 1 minute, then your 1 minute of general public comment on matters before the Transportation Committee in our jurisdiction.
Thank you. Once again, Lozman, Lozman versus the City of Rivera Beach, Florida. What? Intimidation and retaliation.
That has nothing
Systematically,
to do,
transportation.
The jurisdiction of the Transportation.
This is about transportation. When I ride in a bus, a plane, a boat, it's all about transportation. Why does the TN transportation nigger want to censor me all the time? Shut the fuck up and give me my 60 seconds so I can get the fuck out of here and not deal with your goddamn fucking racist intimidation and retaliation, boy. You got it? That's it. Shut the fuck up. Systematically, the City of Los Angeles has retaliated against Mr. Spindler, Miss Antonia, and I, a white nigger motherfucker from Boyle Heights in CD14. I use a bus, I ride a skateboard, I ride a bike, and I can fucking walk with my fucked up disability.
Goodbye. Ms. Ramirez. 2 minutes for the items on the agenda, then 1 minute for general public comment.
Item number 1, stop hiring ghetto bus drivers. We need more white and Asian bus drivers. We are overgluttoned with Latinos, gangbangers, and wetbacks, and many black bus drivers as well. We need safety, security from all wetbacks and gangbangers and black, white trash gang stalkers. Hire more non-Latino security companies. Please do not hire Cypress Security Services. They hire Latina and Latino gangbangers. Put more buses on the road like number 2, number 4, number 92, 92, number 180, number 181, and number 183, and number 201. And stop the harassment and gang stalkings by the nosy, jealous, violent wetbacks and gangbangers who are at the bus stops, the hubs, and the inside the buses and the trains and all around with their all their homies. All they do is exchange drugs, contraband, and harass the patrons. Many of your good, legal, law-abiding citizens are trying to get from point A to point B, and all you have is nothing but obstruction by all these goddamn wetbacks and gangbangers. And I want to thank the LAPD and the sheriff's deputies for being there and helping remove these disgusting, undesirable assholes from hurting and harassing and stealing property. And also, I just also, number 20, $9 million grant for building a fund for Tahunga Avenue. Hell no. What we need $9 million for is to get ICE and deport the gangbangers and the wetbacks contaminating the entire rail system. It is disastrous. It is a shame. People are being attacked, violated, robbed, and just horrendously obstructed from point A to point B. This has to stop. People should ride the buses and the trains without being harassed. 22, there are no safe routes. We need safe routes. We need people to monitor these routes that are all dangerous.
You now have 1 minute for general public comment on matters under the jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee.
Thank you very much. First, let me again thank the LAPD and the Sheriff's Department. God bless the LAPD and the deputies for securing our person and property. When I said that the Transportation Department is coming to a crash, I meant it, because it is in utter decay and disarray. I meant that both LA Dot and Metro are dangerously unsafe, again with your goddamn wetbacks and gangbangers, unclean, filthy surfaces with MRSA, bedbugs, scabies, and all that staph infections. The staff also, the time connections are over 1 hour. Waiting time for buses 180, 181, 92, 24 are over 1 hour. You have an epidemic of 3 human trash components. They are the goddamn fucking filthy, nasty wetbacks and the gangbangers and the junkies. They are black and white trash. And then you got theft on the buses and the trains, and vandalism. It doesn't stop. It says, say something if you see something. I would urge you not to say anything, but do it discreetly if you're going to do it. God bless Donald Trump and God bless America and deport the fucking wetbacks and gangbangers.
Mr. Spindler, you have 2 minutes for the items on the agenda.
All right, good. So, we have a whole bunch of this fucking shit where you're treating people as homeless as transportation niggers, and it needs to stop and stop immediately. Just because you live in a fucking car and you park in a rich white neighborhood, you should not be treated as if you're a nigger on a plantation. It needs to stop. Pacific Palisades is not a plantation. Downtown LA is not a plantation. Well, in Nuri's district, Van Nuys, yes, that is a plantation, but I'll get to that later in federal court. So now we look at all these fucking sidewalk street vendors having to have a vehicle under 22 feet and 7 feet high. What you are doing is you're violating federal law by making a systemic retaliation against people who live in RVs. We know you can't buy a fucking RV with less than 22 feet in length, you dumb fuck, and you know that most of them are a little over 7 feet. So what you do is you hire rich Jewish attorneys who then use people from the Middle East to design plans to not let people live in their fucking RVs and cars. Why? You said, and Nuri said, that if you want to live in your fucking RV, you won't be fucked with, and you'll be able to park on Victory Boulevard. Liar. Absolute liar, yes. Because the puppet did an experiment. He got an RV, he parked it, and videotaped you ticketing someone under the statute in a 21.9 fucking foot RV. We set your ass up, and you'll be notified in court.
1 minute for matters under the jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee.
Yeah, so what in the fuck do you know about the jurisdiction? You don't know shit about the law. The only reason you got your fucking job was because of Bill Rosendahl, and you stabbed him in the back before he passed away. The last time I saw him, he said, Wayne, Mike Bonnet is the worst fucking mistake I ever made in my life. He has sold out the people, he sold out Venice, and he sold out the homeless community. You broke the man's heart. And now you're here today telling us we can't talk about the Brown Act. We can't talk about Lozman versus the city of Riviera Beach. Of course we can fucking talk about it. And the reason we can talk about
matters under the jurisdiction of the Transportation Committee.
Jurisdiction is goddamn point that I can't speak on a general public comment about the procedural aspects of the meeting. I absolutely have the right.
You got 10
I have the goddamn right.
Out of the room.
I said I got 10 points there. 5.
Mr. Herman, you're also out.
2.
Mr. Herman is also dismissed.
The gentleman that time on the clock, you fucking fool.
Time on the clock.
Fuck you.
Procedural matter, the way the meeting is done.
Don't touch me, I'm not doing it, buddy. Hands up. You can't push me. I'm disabled. You can't push me. Get your fucking hands up, you retard. Get your hands up, you retard. I'm disabled. Bullshit. Get him up. Hands up. De-escalate this shit. Come on, leave me alone. Don't shoot. Don't shoot. No.
There's no words.
I am told that there are scurrilous corners of the internet called subthreads on 4chan. This is what I imagine it is like. So for those of you who have not been here, I will, as is my custom at this committee, apologize that you had to endure what you just had to endure. The courts have interpreted that we are not allowed to forbid that kind of activity, although they have sorely tried the patience of members of the elected body, members of city staff, members of the public who are forced to endure it. So my apologies. Trust me, there is no one who would like to stop that more than those of us sitting up here. So, Mr. Previn, please elevate the debate.
Okay, it's Eric Previn from CD2, and you know, when people are descending into the spiralness of homelessness, they frequently are facing no choice but to stay in their car as shelter. That includes women, veterans, children, families. You know, they don't have a choice. So I'm anxious about today's agenda. As I glanced at it on my way out the door, I noticed dozens of restrictions on parking in various forms. Mostly they're the larger vehicles on streets in Bonin's district and in Englander's district and in, I believe, Martinez's district. But it spans citywide, and it's a strategy, obviously, to wire up places so we can say, nope, not here. And whereas I do appreciate that you don't want it on your street, I'm really struggling because I hear about safe parking, and I've done a little research. And, you know, Sheila Kuehl, to her credit, provided for some parking spaces at a public health facility, and then at another facility on Melrose. Each of those is 10 spaces. So this is for the nighttime, between 9 p.m. and 6 in the morning. People can go there, there's a security guard, and they can park. But I think you know we have 6,500 or so people, and these are people who are trying to go to work. And so 8502 makes it that if they park near a place where they can clean up the next day and go to work and take the kids, this can do the thing that, you know, is just unimaginable for some of us, it's harder. And so I don't know where we're going with this. I was surprised that we weren't moving to relax some of this until we can provide safe parking for people, because 20 spaces in a big county district, and I mean, that's just not cutting it. And I don't know, you know, where this goes. The preferential parking district is another component. I know Mr. Nagel and Salita Reynolds will get Felix to finally provide the public records that we asked for, but we have to stop this kind of stuff. So, in terms of my general public comment, you'll be pleased to hear. I want to say something that you won't like, which is that I'm concerned that the MTA all overtime LAPD contract has swollen from approximately 373 to, I think it's $411 million. And I felt like that went a little underreported, and why, I'm not sure. And then jumping to the City of New York and the Great Vision Zero program across the country, you know, there's a guy named Cordell Schachter, and I'm calling him out here because he works with the mayor in New York. They have a problem with tagging people for using GPS in the car there. They have a trap that is so pernicious. I got caught in it and popped out and survived, but they won't provide an appeal. And so I'm raising it up for the powers that be in Vision Zero to make it clear that we have to do smart stuff. Like, I love the AAA don't drive intoxicated thing. That's a great ad. It freaks people out and it makes them put their phones down. But going around and hammering people coming out of JFK is not going to get it done.
Thank you, Mr. Previn. I had two other cards for general public comment. One of them is Amelia Crotty. Amelia, did you want to do general public comment, or did you want to testify on one of the items on the agenda?
We have two items, so if you guys do general, I'll put very long agenda.
Which items did you want to speak on?
Safe routes to school and Dr. Spectre. You want me to wait? I can wait.
Come up and do safe routes for schools now.
Good afternoon, Amelia Crotty with Los Angeles Walks. So I'm here to voice Los Angeles Walks' strong support for safe routes to school. We know through the Vision Zero program that traffic collisions are the #1 cause of death of children in Los Angeles, and that children around schools ranks very high on the list of collision factors according to the Vision Zero program. And we want to see the Safe Routes to School program continuing. It's been quietly chugging along, making real improvements around schools that are saving kids' lives. So to us, it's a no-brainer, and we hope that you also support it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
While you're up here, you can do your minute on the dock list.
Okay, so we also are fully in support of dockless bike and scooter share, but we do want to make sure that the access and comfort of our most vulnerable residents are prioritized, including people with disabilities and our older adults. When we talk about equity, we also always have to consider our people with disabilities and our older adults. So in the letter I submitted to the committee, we recommended increasing the engagement by these operators to communities with disability and older adults, and also clarifying for those groups how to request removal of vehicles that may be blocking their access. Thank you.
Thank you. And I had one more public comment card, Jamie Baller. Is Jamie here, or was that an alias for one of the folks who have been thrown out? Okay. All right, that closes general public comment. Ms. Martinez, I was going to suggest items 2 through 10 and 12 through 22 on consent.
No.
So 2 through 10, 12 through 22 are approved on consent. I'm going to continue item 23. And let me go quickly to item 11. I believe there's a technical change to that.
Item 11 is a Wesson Price resolution relative to establishing an overnight parking district to prohibit the parking of vehicles by non-residents between the hours of 2 and 6 a.m.
Okay. So without objection, that is approved. All right, and that brings us to item number 24, which...
Item 24 is the LADOT report relative to the dockless on-demand personal mobility services.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about item number 1. Hold on.
Okay. Item number 1 is the general manager of LADOT to present a verbal report relative to the ongoing projects and recognition of LADOT employees for outstanding service.
Thank you. Council members, we appreciate, as always, the opportunity to come before you and recognize outstanding staff at LADOT. Today we have a couple of really special honorees. The first one, just stand when I say your name, is Mario Interiano, Senior Management Analyst 1. So Mario has been here just over a year. He is responsible for supervising 12 employees within the Parking Operations and Support Division. He's an outstanding employee who on a daily basis goes above and beyond in his administrative duties and exceeds the performance standards for his position as supervising manager. Mario willingly accepts new assignments and offers to help wherever he can. He has demonstrated excellent managerial and decision-making skills and is a dependable employee. He helped facilitate the successful implementation of the Community Assistance Parking Program, which aims to assist homeless individuals with their parking citations. The implementation required the development of policies and procedures and building relationships with community-based organizations. Thus far, CAP has assisted nearly 300 individuals and has converted approximately $120,000 in outstanding parking citations to community service hours. Mario also supervises a unit that reduced a backlog of public requests for parking citation reviews by 65%, going from nearly 9,000 to 3,100 in 1 year. Mario also administers 2 critical service contracts, the Parking Citation Processing Service Contract and the Citywide Parking Meter Coin Collection Service Contract. Under his supervision, vendor invoices are processed in a timely way, and he fosters a positive working relationship between city staff and the contractors. Overseeing these responsibilities requires a strong work ethic, attention to detail, and a high level of professionalism. Mario has demonstrated all of these values and more. Mario is also admired by his staff and sets a great example for the rest of the division. He is an outstanding city employee and deserves to be recognized for his hard work. Thanks, Mario. And second, today it is with heavy hearts that we are doing a bittersweet recognition for Nat Gale, who is the Principal Project Coordinator of the Vision Zero Division. Nat began his illustrious career in LA City government as a humble and eager intern in the mayor's Clean Tech program 8 years ago. Since then, he's gained an unrivaled reputation for getting the hardest things done. From moving the Endeavour Space Shuttle to starting up Mayor Garcetti's Great Streets Initiative to spearheading the Vision Zero initiative, Nat has never shied away from a good challenge. Nat grew up on the East Coast, but is now a consummate Angelino and a huge Dodger fan, although he still has a place in his heart for the Buffalo Bills and the Hartford Whalers. He is a key member of LADOT's softball team, the Dodgers. See what we did there? Where his teamwork efforts shine. He is educated at both Columbia and USC and bikes to work and meetings. His bike once met a pothole and stopped while he kept going. I was there, I saw the whole thing happen, it was terrifying. His optimism is infectious. His humility, self-awareness, and kindness are peerless. His talent for thinking of everything, including gifts for the entire staff when he travels, are what make him a leader that thrives in the details. And he does it all in a fashionable style. Colorful socks, stylish eyewear, and short-sleeve shirts with prints like hedgehogs and bicycles. You cannot replace a Nat Gale. We wish him well in his new adventure and can't wait to bring him back one day. Nat's last day is July 12th. Please join me in congratulating Nat and Mario for their outstanding performance and their commitment to LADOT's vision.
That was well done. First of all, congratulations to Mario. And to Nat, is it true you're moving to Mar Vista?
Playa.
What you may not have known is the place he interned was for my husband. For my husband in the mayor's office back under Mayor Villaraigosa.
How long you turned out?
I know. Where are you going?
Nat is going to start up the LA office of Tool Design Group, a really outstanding consultant that does bicycle and pedestrian planning and design. And we've worked with them on our Main and Spring Street projects, and they're great. And so he's going out to be an entrepreneur. He done turned state's evidence on us and is going over to the dark side.
Wow. What a send-off.
I was going to try to say something both funny and snarky at the same time, which has been my tendency with you over the past 8 years, but Salita really beat me to it on all those counts, so is there anything you'd like to add? Ms. Martinez? No?
All good. All right.
Congratulations, we're going to miss you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. I am told by my capable staff that we need to reconsider item 21 for an amendment. If you could read item 21 in.
Item 21 is the city attorney report and ordinance relative to adding a new section of the municipal code related to the stalls and spaces on a public street or publicly owned parking facility for the exclusive purpose of charging and parking a vehicle that is connected to electric charging stations.
Okay, when this item was here at our last meeting, we provided direction to the city attorney to add an exemption to the AGF for electric vehicle charging. But that office occasionally being persnickety, now insists that the direction must now come from the full city council and not just from the committee chair. So what I would like to do is receive and file the draft ordinance and request the city attorney to amend the draft ordinance to include an exemption to the AGF ordinance for EV charging infrastructure. Any objection? Okay, so that is the direction. That brings us now to item number 24.
Item 24 is a DOT report relative to the DACA's on-demand personal mobility services, including the DACA's on-demand personal mobility rules and regulations.
We did that. All right, we'll come back to it. Okay, can you call up item 24 so I can read the speaker cards? Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, we have a number of speaker cards. Let me start with Jeremy Lee, Shane Phillips, Phil Recht, and Thomas Lord. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Jeremy Lee. I'm a Senior Business Development Manager at Jump Bikes. Thank you, LA DOT, for the well-researched and articulated proposal. For the council, I have 2 points I'd like to call to your attention. First, while the Lock 2 feature is no longer a requirement of operation in LA, Jump Bikes will still have this feature. For context, in Washington, D.C., less than 0.5% of all jump rides result in a parking complaint. In contrast, our competitors without the Lock 2 feature have seen complaints as high as 27% of their trips. At Jump, we fundamentally believe the Lock 2 provides a better experience for the community, and we feel this differentiator will become apparent in LA as well. Second, we believe the city's focus on equity is critical, and we commend LA DOT for framing the pilot in this way. Jump's e-bikes have shown to be particularly impactful in those areas of the city that are not well connected by public transportation. In San Francisco, over 40% of our trips start or end in areas the city has classified as a community of concern. Our e-bikes are used on average for trips over 2.5 miles. Pedal bikes are used for trips of less than 1 mile. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please.
Hey, Shane Phillips with Central City Association. We'd first like to thank DOT for their work on these regulations through multiple drafts, and thank the committee for their support of dockless services in downtown. We shared a letter yesterday outlining a few remaining concerns, the biggest being our belief that the 2,500 vehicle cap is still too low. 2 weeks ago, city staff in Santa Monica proposed a cap of 500 vehicles, which adjusted for population would be equivalent to a 20,000 vehicle cap in LA. Despite that relatively high number, Santa Monica City Council still rejected it and instead will use a dynamic cap based on ridership. Santa Monica has more experience with dockless vehicles than any other city in this region, and we think LA should follow their lead and also use only a dynamic fleet size cap. We're also very concerned that the regulations appear to have a veto option for each council district where council members could block all dockless services from their individual districts. Since trips don't start and end at council district boundaries, we ask that outreach continue to be a requirement, but that the veto option be removed. Thank you.
Phil?
Good afternoon. Phil Reck, representing OFO Bikes. We have comments on 3 items. First, on the fleet size, we continue to believe this is something that the market should determine. These operators are private companies. They have no financial or operational incentive to have unused devices on the streets. But if you are going to have a cap, we urge you not to use arbitrary usage levels as a criteria for allowing it to expand. These usage levels differ based on locality and device, and if you come up with an artificial one like 3 uses per day, which happens to be 3 times higher than the current Metro Bike usage, you're only going to suppress appropriate growth, particularly in previously unserved parts of the city. Similarly, fleet mix is something that we think you should let the market decide. If you require 1/2 of all fleets to be electric, you could artificially suppress the natural market for pedal bikes, which are the least expensive, and the device is best for the environment and healthy lifestyles. Finally, we think the fees being proposed, the Santa Monica fees, are really exorbitant, far beyond the city's regulatory expenses. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Thomas Lord, General. Sorry.
That was for Phil.
Thomas Lord, General Manager for Lime. We'd like to thank the LA DOT for the obvious amount of work that's gone into this report. There's 2 things that we'd also like to bring up. One is fleet size. We also recommend a dynamic fleet size that changes with ridership. The other is that we would recommend completely striking the lock to requirement. We think it causes a lot of problems where devices are locked to each other and locked to things they shouldn't be. We've submitted a little bit more detail on the report in a letter, but generally we think it's going the right direction. We're extremely excited to be a part of the program here in LA.
Thank you very much. Next 4 speakers, Alex Nessick, David Estrada, Muriel McDonald, and Adam Kramer.
Good afternoon. I'm Alex Nessick with Clever Mobility. While the mobility data specification is a good start, we are advocating that operators use technology to make regulatory compliance proactive rather than a public enforcement issue. Specifically, enhanced GPS with accuracy inside of 3 feet enables capabilities like geofencing of designated areas in real time by network communication with devices, limiting top speeds or entirely disabling devices on sidewalks, and accurately managing designated parking zones, and more. The technology is available, but it is apparent that operators are not deploying their products in an efficient and conscientious manner, forcing cities to adapt to less than ideal circumstances while also incurring the additional burden. We want the City of LA to be aware that it can hold dockless operators to a higher, more intelligent, and safer standard than is currently being deployed. Thank you.
Do we care who goes next? Hi, Chair Bonin and Council, thanks for having us here. So I'm David Estrada, I lead government relations at Bird. I just want to talk about one point, and it's fleet size caps. And I want to distinguish what is a static cap and what is a dynamic cap, and they're 2 different things. So I think what staff came back with in their report was they were responding to what you guys said last time, which is we really don't like these static caps. Let's look at something that's more dynamic. So in the memo, they say we're doing a dynamic cap. In the proposal, it's 3 different layers of static caps. It's 500, 2,500, 5,000. For us at Bird, we currently have a fleet size of about 6,000 scooters in the LA metro area that flow in and out of LA city boundaries. If you start by saying we're going to start with 500, you essentially say get rid of most of your fleet. So get rid of most of your fleet for what goal? What's going to happen is you're simply going to tell people, get back into cars and let us start this all over again, trying to get you back out of cars. Let's instead start where we are and use a dynamic cap, a real dynamic cap.
Hi, I'm Muriel McDonald. I'm the Director of Public Affairs for SCIP. I have 2 things to raise with you today. One is that we believe that vigorous competition among several providers is in the best interests of LA residents, visitors, and the community. As one of the only companies trying to do this the right way and only launching with permission in cities that have given us permits, we worry that the current rules as written will allow the best funded operators to cherry pick their favorite districts and ignore a broad swath of LA residents. We think that more players in more places is good for LA communities. And you should be incentivizing as many carriers as possible to be in as many places as possible. One easy way to do this would be neighborhood caps and district caps that are lower than the overall operator caps, which would force operators to be in as many districts as possible. Second, One oversight that doesn't appear to be addressed in the rules is whether operators really are environmentally responsible actors as they claim. The city should be asking whether operators intend to repair their scooters or warehouse broken ones and replace them with new ones. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Adam Kramer. For the past 7 months, I've been working with Bird as a charger. And chargers are tasked with picking up birds, recharging them, and then redistributing them after they're charged. And I've had the pleasure of moving between 500 and 700 birds per day for the last couple months here. After reading through the proposed legislation, I'm very concerned that the quantity of scooters that's proposed is going to have a tremendous impact on the community of chargers and as well as the mechanic community. Essentially, putting a cap on the amount of scooters is going to seriously threaten the livelihood of a lot of people, literally hundreds of chargers who do this as either their part-time job or full-time job and employ other people to work for them in order to charge the ecosystem of scooters in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rich Branning and Kevin Alcabillo from CD14.
Hello, Council. My name is Rich Branning. Originally, I'm from the Bay Area, moved down 2 years ago, sold my car when I moved, and was primarily using Uber and Lyft to get around. When Bird came onto the scene, I started using that as my main means of transportation. It was more cost-effective and more efficient than sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic on Wilshire for 25 minutes each day to go 2 miles. I think the important thing and what I realize is that a lot of my time is spent in a 2 to 3 mile radius, and I think that resonates with a lot of people in my age group where we grab lunch, work, go to the grocery store, visit friends and family all in pretty close quarters. I think the main takeaway here is that if we limit supply, we limit accessibility, and by limiting accessibility, you really limit the magic of what this entire industry is about, is the ability for me to go see my niece, and it takes 2 miles to get there. I can't walk half a mile to go to the nearest scooter. I have to be in closer quarters to make it efficient. So I think that's really what the crux of the issue is going to be about.
Thank you. Kevin?
Good afternoon. Kevin Acapillo on behalf of Councilmember Jose Huizar. Our transportation options should be varied, comfortable, and convenient to find. Dockless, on-demand personal mobility options like bikes and scooters fit that description. And as everyone knows, Los Angeles' largest open space asset is our streets, and they serve a variety of people and for a variety of reasons. At the same time, the public right-of-way has become one of the most contested landscapes in Los Angeles, and nowhere is that more apparent than here in downtown. The plan before us lacks satisfactory enforcement strategy. The plan puts the task of enforcement on BSS and sanitation. However, they've been absent in these discussions. Every council office has had to come up with creative funding solutions to address existing deficiencies in our public right-of-way, from encampments to sidewalk repair. And while enforcement clearly falls under the jurisdiction of BSS and sanitation, the mechanics and costs of enforcement are absent. Allowing thousands, potentially tens of thousands of free-flowing, privately owned but publicly operated bikes and scooters to operate in our right-of-way without a clear plan to prevent disruption of public spaces, sidewalks, and streets will only compound the problem. Councilmember Huizar would like to involve the Bureau of Street Services and Sanitation in the conversation to discuss the details of how their departments plan to carry that out. Finally, we would also ask that LADOT, BSS, and Sanitation report back to Council on the status of the program within 3 months of its launch. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. DOT has a presentation today? Yes? So before DOT starts, let me just say something. First of all, everybody, take a deep breath. These regulations are not going to be final and permanent for all time. These are how Los Angeles is going to start governing dockless. We are a big city, we are a diverse city. We are not Santa Monica. We have lots of different neighborhoods and different needs and a lot of different interests to consider. So this is how Los Angeles is going to start, either what DOT proposes or what we modify it to. And it will be changed over time. We are going to learn things from the first year of this that will dictate further changes. I'll say as a way of framing my perspective on this, I think that the dockless stuff, particularly the scooters, are wonderful for a lot of the reasons that were outlined. It's a great way to get people out of cars. I'm thrilled about the possibility of having more people out in support of protected bike lanes and alternative modes of transportation. And I think it's a huge benefit for the environment. I have heard from folks, because I have a lot of them in Venice and Mar Vista, over the past few months, who have talked about how they love using the scooters as an alternative to a car. My sister-in-law got married recently. In-laws came down from Oregon. Those in their 20s and those in their 60s were using the dockless scooters to get around Venice. Talked to another guy the other night, 35-year-old from Larchmont, who was in Venice for dinner. He beat a friend of his to Abbot Kinney. The guy was in a car. He was on the scooter. Good thing. On the other hand, we also represent a lot of other people. We represent business people who are concerned with clutter in front of their businesses. We represent pedestrians and people with disabilities who are concerned about obstruction of the public right-of-way. And we have a lot of different needs to balance. And we are not going to, in what DOT proposes or in what the council finally approves, going to do something that makes everybody happy, because we have to balance those needs. And that is extremely important for us to do, and it's our mandate, is to balance those needs. So this is going to be something that will be a start, a work in progress, and an attempt to balance the needs that you, from the 500 different companies that are now springing up doing dockless in Los Angeles and the area, express, but also what other folks need to do. So with that, Ms. Reynolds.
Great. So I appreciate the opportunity to bring these recommendations back before you. We took to heart all that we heard from this committee and from the public and from the companies to try and execute on exactly what you are articulating. It's a balance, and it's also a crawl, walk, run approach. LADOT has spent the last 2 years thinking carefully about how we change the way that we manage and deploy private mobility operators, because these are the business models before you today, right? And they are precedent for everything that's going to come after them that we can't even foresee. And so a lot of what we are trying to do here is foundational, not just for dockless and for scooters and e-bikes, but for managing private actors generally who are going to want to start businesses in Los Angeles. And we want to encourage that. And we are excited that these services might create a virtuous cycle, in particular, that their users will be just as passionate in, and these companies will be just as organized in advocating for sustainable infrastructure as they have been for advocating the cap and lifting the cap on the vehicles, right? That's the opportunity here, is that we create a new constituency for great streets in Los Angeles. So in the spirit of doing that and trying to welcome innovation and give predictability and certainty to companies, for us to learn to balance all of the concerns that you raised, and to start to see these things grow in Los Angeles, we made a couple of kind of foundational changes to the recommendations. I'm going to let Marcel Porras, who's the Chief Sustainability Officer for LADOT, talk about a couple of those, and then make one clarification about a passage in the report so that we can get that on the record as well. Marcel.
Thank you. Marcel Porras, Chief Sustainability Officer at LADOT. Go Mexico and go Korea.
Aren't you Colombian?
Tomorrow at 7 a.m., Councilwoman. We're looking for your support as well. Thank you. So in response to the direction from the Transportation Committee at the last meeting, we did look at specifically and heard from various council offices in terms of removing the GeoHub. So we did away with the Geo fence from the initial proposals. We also thought a lot about the cap specifically, and I think following what other cities have done across the country is we created language in the rules and guidelines that authorize the general manager the discretion to increase those caps based on performance and compliance. I think those are things that we are going to need to learn as the pilot runs in terms of evaluation. And to some of the comments that were said earlier today. And then I think the other piece too, and this was in response again to the committee, was clarifying council's role in the process. The rules and guidelines already called out for, in the outreach portion, engaging council offices, neighborhood councils, business improvement districts. And one thing that we had initially proposed was actually putting a sign-off per each permit application for the council office, but after consultation with the city attorney, it was clear that that could potentially create a legal issue. And so I think what we're doing, what we intend to do is, in the rules and guidelines, the outreach component still stands, and LADOT in the permit application will ensure that there is proper notification to the council offices and acknowledgement from the city council, specific city council offices, that they were consulted by the existing companies.
I'm sure Mr. Englander will let you know if it's not sufficient notification.
Yes. Any questions?
Anything else you want to say? Okay. Before I get into it and Ms. Martinez gets into it, let me just say one other thing by way of sort of framing the discussion, because a lot of the comments I've heard from the different companies have been one variation or another on the idea that you don't want to trust DOT, that you don't want them to be making decisions about when a cap goes up, or you don't want them to be making decisions about whether to lock or not. Let me tell you, you do want DOT to be making those decisions. You absolutely want DOT to be making those decisions. Because if you want us to give no flexibility to DOT, and if you want every little detail of something as dynamic as this issue, which is going to keep on evolving and changing, certainly month to month, if not more rapidly, to have to come to council, then you are saying that you want to be investing heavily and significantly in hiring lobbyists, no offense to you guys in the room here, and that you are going to want to wait a significant period of time for even the smallest change or alteration. I just opened a bathroom at Venice Beach. It took 2 goddamn years. You don't want to have to go through that kind of nonsense. You want some flexibility for this department to adapt and change. I know, for the VCs and the tech industry and the new startups, you may not want to have to deal with the idea of an agency. You are better off with DOT managing with some regulatory flexibility that we give them than having to go through an exhaustive council process to change something. I assure you. So with that, let me just ask a couple questions, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Martinez. I want to actually start with, I've got like 47 pages of briefing memo here. Just state that, as a goal, as I said earlier, we want to try to strike a balance between the company's desire to grow fast and the city's need to manage our public right away. And that's going to require both responsible growth on your part and nimble management on their part. And we're going to have to work very carefully to make sure that happens. So the elements that remain unchanged from when we were last here are on data sharing. I know Marcel talked about some of the changes. I want to frame the whole package here. On data sharing, all operators are going to be required to provide real-time and historical info on their fleets and allow LADOT to use a third-party researcher for evaluation and enforcement of the operating permit. And they're proposing a new data standard for this. On outreach and equity, an outreach plan is to be included in the permit, as well as an incentive to add up to 2,500 vehicles in low-income communities by exempting them from the fleet size cap. Operators must provide a non-smartphone option for reservations, a cash payment option, reduced fares for low-income individuals, a multilingual mobile app, and a call center. On safety, all vehicles are going to be required to adhere to California safety standards and submit a record of reported collisions on a monthly basis. And on operations and maintenance, operators must provide maintenance logs and have a staffed operations center. Then there are some outstanding questions for us to look at today regarding fleet size, council approval, fees, outreach, safety, and enforcement. I think Marcel addressed the council approval, that the way some of the council members had wanted to see it with a hard approval or veto by the council member doesn't meet the city attorney's standards and is rewritten in an amendment being put forward today to be notification to the council offices and presumably good faith cooperation with the council offices. There are two different fee structures proposed, and I wanted to ask a question about the fees. You proposed two different fee structures. They're very different. Can you explain what those options are and why you recommend those two?
Sure. So looking at most recently the action that the city of Santa Monica did in terms of their fee structures. So we looked at that information. We also spent some additional time looking at resources needed and doing a fee analysis that looks at the resources that we're going to need in terms of staffing, in terms of consultant services. And also in terms of the desirability of deploying vehicles in certain areas, and then also creating incentives for areas such as disadvantaged communities. We created, we put forth the initial option, but the new option that was informed by the research was to create a $130 per vehicle fee and a reduced fee, and that fee would be for any part of the city that is not within the disadvantaged communities. And we applied, in order to incentivize more vehicles going into disadvantaged communities, we applied a 70% discount on that 130 fee, which resulted in a $39 per vehicle fee. In addition, we requested a $20,000 permit application fee, which also mirrors what the city of Santa Monica does, and that also reflects the resources that we believe we're going to need in order to effectively manage the program.
So I want to ask a question about the $20,000 fee. Mr. Recht says it's too high. It's the fee Santa Monica has, and I certainly would have a hard time justifying to the people I represent in the neighborhoods right around Santa Monica that we have a lower standard and are leaving money on the table. My question is, for $20,000 you get access to the market in a city of a population, I don't know, 85,000 or so. Why is it only $20,000 to get access to a market that is exponentially larger?
I think our initial thinking was to try and establish a permit fee that was more about what we think we need to procure in order to manage and deliver the program. So we were tying it in a nexus more to, if there are a minimum of 5 companies, doing the math on an annual consultant contract and eventually potentially a staff position to manage that program. So it wasn't so much about the gateway to the, trying to tether it to the value proposition for the company, but tethering it to at least our initial best guess at what we think we'll need, and, reserving the right to potentially need to come back in the future once we understand a little bit more about what our needs are going to be.
And that's an annual fee?
Correct.
Okay. On safety, this version of the rules inadvertently left out a requirement that bikes have taillights, and so we're going to want to add that back in. It also left out a definition of what an electric scooter is, and we should add a citation of the applicable California Vehicle Code section. I also would like to see, and this will, I think, help with a lot of the problems that we're hearing in striking the balance. People are very concerned about how fast people are going on sidewalks. Under California Vehicle Code, you're not allowed to use motorized devices on sidewalks, right? What I'd like to see on the scooters, on the platform, is a sticker that indicates you're not supposed to ride on sidewalks in a 48-point font minimum, so that you actually see it. And I looked at font sizes downstairs. 48 ain't that big, but it's big enough to read. And it's big enough for me to read even without my glasses. And that will give folks a lot of assurance. And then I've got some more questions on enforcement and some thoughts on fleet size, but I want to turn it over to Ms. Martinez, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on the report, it recommends that the operators be given an opportunity to add up an additional 2,500 vehicles for a total of 5,000 located in disadvantaged communities. So my question is, are we limiting the additional 2,500 to disadvantaged communities? So that's what we're doing?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
and then my follow-up question was like, will the companies be required to place all 2,500 vehicles in disadvantaged communities?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes to both questions?
Yes to both questions. And then just to add, we're also requesting that they submit an equity plan, and we're contemplating in our administrative guidelines that they need to guarantee.
Review the equity plan?
Well,
How
so
often are they required to submit that?
So in our administrative guidelines, I'm specifically looking to include that there is a guaranteed service level measured in service hours in disadvantaged communities, and that's something that we would monitor on a real-time basis to make sure that they're meeting that commitment.
Got it. Okay.
So not just the number of vehicles, but that they're active, that they're there, that they're present, because some of them charge overnight and things like that. So service hours seem like the best way.
Okay, I like that very much. And after how long in operation will the department review whether the operator can go ahead and increase their fleet size?
So
how long are you giving them before they can actually apply to increase that fleet size?
3 months.
3 months?
We're saying that we're going to review it with them on a quarterly basis to increase, or for us to say for them to decrease, depending on if they're underperforming or if they're not performing properly on certain metrics that we think their fleet is too large and we want them to decrease it. But we're doing that monitoring on a quarterly basis. We may decide that that's too long and we want to do it on a more regular basis.
And so what are you taking into consideration? What are the justifications for an operator who wants to increase their fleet size? What are you looking for?
So we're looking for the use of the fleet that's out there today, right? Are they putting out, thousands of vehicles and the vehicles are sitting idle and they're sitting in sidewalks for weeks at a time and not being used? Then, we might lower that cap. Or they're putting them out there and they're going gangbusters and they're getting 2 or 3 rides a day, and so we allow them to increase their fleet size. So it's about use of the fleet itself. It's also about whether or not they are adhering to the rules and guidelines that we've set out. So say we have a company that is getting great use, but they're failing on their equity plan and they're not meeting their commitments, or their bikes, they're not clearing bikes in a timely way as we've laid out. And then we might say, you've got the use, but you're violating our guidelines, so we're not going to let you increase.
So this will fall under your purview as a general manager.
That's correct.
So if the growth is going well, you should be able to respond to these companies in real time on a regular basis.
Correct. And we've contemplated that by putting out the mobility data specifications, that we are going to crawl, walk, run to a place where we really are making these decisions in real time. We're writing business rules and pushing it out to the platform in real time.
My next question is, what thought was given to increasing the cap or removing the cap in disadvantaged communities? What was the thought process behind that? And the reason I'm asking is, what are we going to do with those companies who want to increase the cap, but they haven't invested into disadvantaged communities? How are we setting that up?
Yeah, so I think off the bat, if you want to double the size of the fleet from 2,500 to 5,000, you have to go in disadvantaged communities, straight up. Sorry.
I think I bring it out of you. Yeah.
You can add your 40.
Okay.
Okay. All right. We're just going to move on. All right. So you get what I'm trying to go here is I just want to make sure that these services are getting into disadvantaged communities because they're often the communities with the poor air quality, environmental issues. So they should be the first to be able to get these types of services into their area.
Agree.
And I think to add to that, I think there's a lot for us to learn, and I think that it needs to go beyond just the vehicles being in the disadvantaged community, and it has to be tied to actual utilization. And so what are those barriers? And that's why we put a non-credit card option, a non-smartphone option. So we've put that in the guidelines already. We're going to have to see how that works, right? Like they could create a non-smartphone option, but maybe it's not utilized. Maybe it's buried deep within their service, guidelines. And so I think for us, we're going to need to track that. And I think at some point we want to evolve guidelines so that we're looking at outcomes of ridership in low-income communities and not just the vehicles being there themselves.
And how is the 3 rides per device point developed? Does it include both scooters and bikes? How did you come up with that? I know I have a follow-up question. I just want to figure out what the rationale is because it will impact. I'm concerned about, Mr. Chair, that this criteria showing that all vehicles are required a 3 ride per day in order to expand. If you're basing it on that, not all communities are created equal. And so if that's your basis, then how are you going to incentivize to actually expand in disadvantaged communities? Do you follow my train of thought?
Yes. So I think that's what the idea is behind, letting DOT work through these administrative guidelines and equity plans so that we can dig on questions like this, right? So do we want to say in a disadvantaged community, maybe the rides per day is slightly lower, but we still want to incent companies to share the problem solving and making sure they get the ridership up, right? 3 is what Santa Monica was using, 3 rides per day. So we were sort of following their lead. But that's something that, again, our intention is to have this be nimble and flexible and understanding this committee and the city council's overall policy direction that we want to incentivize first, last mile and short trip solutions that don't involve getting people in their car.
Let me ask you this. What is the average per day ride for Metro bike sharing?
It's about 1.
1. So why did we use Santa Monica's as opposed to our own?
Because our system is station-based. So we know where they are.
And then my last question, I think, Mr. Chair, you did hit on this, but I want to actually make a recommendation. The report discusses the potential of discounting fees on vehicles in disadvantaged communities, but it's really not clear in terms of what guidelines, what does the guidelines look like in terms of a discounted rate? That wasn't clear in the report.
So,
what does that discount look like?
So I'll read the section. It's in page 10 of the rules and guidelines around outreach in the outreach and equity section. F, operators will offer a 1-year low-income customer plan that waives any applicable bicycle e-scooter deposit and offers an affordable cash payment option and unlimited trips under 30 minutes to any customer with an income level at or below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines subject to annual renewal.
So what does that discounted rate look like? Give me an average.
So in that instance, if you qualify for that low-income rate, you're actually, any ride that you do under 30 minutes is going to be free.
Free, and you don't have any annual, monthly fees, et cetera. So you have unlimited use for free, basically.
So, I want to ensure that that we are giving operators the right incentives to be able to operate in disadvantaged communities. So I actually would like to recommend that we adjust the per vehicle fee in disadvantaged communities to actually reflect that. I don't know if we should do that now, Mr. Chair, but can we think about removing the per vehicle fee in these communities?
Altogether?
Yes.
That's up to you all. If you want to
So,
give a second.
and just, as Councilmember Bodnar brought up, there are two options before you today in terms of the vehicle fees. One was the original proposal for $50 citywide. The second one lowered that to $39 per vehicle in disadvantaged communities and $130 citywide for all non-DACs, disadvantaged communities. So depending on what option you pick, or if you want to amend those options to reduce that, that's up to the committee.
You want to exempt the companies from paying a per vehicle fee in order to incentivize them more?
And then in order for them to incentivize them more to come into disadvantaged communities.
Okay. One thing to consider on that is that the standard we're using for low-income communities is, what is the actual standard? It's the health index?
Disadvantaged communities, a Callan-Byro screen.
Which would also include some high market areas like the Arts District and USC and stuff like that.
That's correct.
That's
So
right.
you'd also be not charging for those areas as well.
Right, so as an example, there are parts of the valley that may not be initially popular, but
That's my point. Like, how do we incentivize them even more to go into the unpopular areas in the valley? How do you get them into Sun Valley? You know where I'm going with
yeah. I think it's going to be,
a Metrolink station in Sun Valley that hardly anybody knows about. How do we incentivize them from going into that corridor along San Fernando Boulevard?
I think it's going to be less around fees, and I think what's going to really move them is cap size. And so I think after we get all their proposal in terms of where they want to go, I think it's going to be about how do we increase cap size and tie it to what maybe it is new geographies. And because what I've learned is that they're not sensitive to fees.
They're not, because they have, you know, there are huge, there's a big giant, you know, sort of spectrum of companies, but many of them have large venture capital money underpinning their operations. So assessing them penalty fees for not doing things is, in other cities, has not been demonstrated to be very powerful in getting them to change behavior. So that was the reason why initially we had the geofences. We were trying to come up with incentives that interest them, and those are location and fleet size.
Okay, we can come back this.
Okay.
We can come back with this particular notion.
Yeah, because you also could, as we learn where things are being deployed and not deployed, we could say there's a cap in the Arts District area in order to force them more into the East Valley, for instance, right?
That's correct. And so, you know, again, we'll see where they deploy, right? We'll have that information because we're going to get the data directly from them in real time. And we'll have the ability to sort of show and map out over time where are these devices being deployed and where aren't they. And they might surprise us, right? They might go into places that we didn't expect because they see that there's a market, they think there's a market there for their services. And if they don't, if we're not getting the results and the outcomes that we want to see, then we would want to think hard about incentivizing or changing or capping in certain neighborhoods and removing the caps entirely in others. The trick, though, is that these things are mobile, right? And so, you know, I had a bike show up in my neighborhood, and the nearest, you know, one is out in Venice, right? That's where it came from, and then it sat in my neighborhood with nobody using it for 3 weeks. Right? So we're going to learn a lot about how these things are used and deployed around the city, and then we want to be able to come back and report on it on a regular basis so that we can adjust these levers to get the outcomes that we want, and the outcomes that the committee wants are very, very clear.
Well, I had another modification that just came to me right now is increasing a cap in disadvantaged communities or give disadvantaged communities their first option to increase their cap.
Do you mean, so can you say more about the second part of what you just said?
So we either increase the cap in disadvantaged communities altogether, or we give disadvantaged communities their first option to increase their fleet.
So who in the disadvantaged communities would be doing, you're saying we would give, what, like a neighborhood council or something like that?
Dibs, no, I don't want to use it.
Well, I don't know what I'm trying to get at.
I'm trying to think through it, but I'm trying to figure out how to push them to the first of the line and get them, get them to the start of the line so that they can actually be taken seriously.
Right. So what I would suggest is, we might be able to, instead of saying, we're doing 2,500 and 2,500 in, disadvantaged communities, non-disadvantaged communities, we could increase that initial cap in disadvantaged communities. We could double it and say you can do 2,500 and you can have an additional 5,000 if you go into disadvantaged communities. And then if you are able to demonstrate service hours and investment and meeting your equity plan, and we're holding the bar high on that, then you can get, more than the 5,000. The general manager could have a discretion to deliver an increase in disadvantaged communities of more than 5,000 every quarter. Something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
State that again, then.
So right now, the way that it works is that you get 2,500.
And 2,500.
And then you get 2,500 if you're going to go in disadvantaged communities. So I'm suggesting right out of the gate, we double that additional chunk that you can deploy in a disadvantaged communities from 2,500 to 5,000. And then what I'm suggesting is that what the report lays out is that every 3 months, DOT can increase the cap in increments up to 5,000. So we might say, or an unlimited number in disadvantaged communities, right? So that I have more authority to increase that cap in those disadvantaged communities. So that's what I put on the table. Marcel, were you going to say something?
I think, because there are a significant amount of disadvantaged communities that qualify within the central Los Angeles region. And I think what may be an opportunity is to actually maybe split up the city or allow another additional cap specifically in disadvantaged communities in San Fernando Valley as an incentive to have them move out there. Because what I'm concerned about is if we're just increasing...
They'll take the 5,000 and they'll just throw them all in the Arts District and all downtown, right? So I think that's a further refinement that could focus in on the area that is the one that we're sort of not sure how it's going to play out.
So state your current recommendation on cap again, based on what you just discussed.
In the San Fernando Valley, right, you can deploy an additional 5,000 bikes on top of your 2,500 right from the beginning. And in the San Fernando Valley, the regions that qualify under the Cal Enviro screen, the general manager can also increase that fleet size in the San Fernando Valley by more than 5,000 bikes on a quarterly, or scooters, whatever, on a quarterly basis. That's what we just brainstormed here at the table.
How do you think that's going to go over CD 12?
Super real time.
City 12, I'm not speaking for City 12, I'm simply speaking for my portion of Valley.
Does City 12 have a lot of convoys from the communities?
I don't think that they're even on the map or...
I don't think they have they have a lot of Cal Enviro screen communities.
Oh, so it's only in the San Fernando Valley in the Cal Enviro screen area?
Yes.
Okay, so you are proposing 2,500 and... How are you stating it? Because I want to get this language right.
And you can do an additional up to, okay, so let's just to make it super complicated.
I don't want anybody leaving the room not understanding.
2,500. Everybody who comes in and you want to do 2,500 and you've done all the things we've asked for, you can have 2,500 to start. You can have an additional 2,500 in a disadvantaged community citywide. Or you can have an additional 5,000 in disadvantaged communities in the San Fernando Valley.
Got it.
On a quarterly basis, the general manager of DOT can increase fleet size in disadvantaged communities in the San Fernando Valley by more than 5,000 devices.
Okay. You're good with that? All right, I'm good with that if the starting is 3,000, not 2,500.
Sold American.
Okay. So.
Can I ask for clarification on the 3,000? Is that 3,000 to start? Just
Yes.
anyone?
Yes.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes. So let me then, before we get to the final recommendations, underscore for those who are concerned about a cap that these regulations do not include a hard cap. Do not include a hard cap. This is, how did the industry describe the kind of cap they wanted?
Dynamic.
A dynamic cap. So there is a hard cap, which this is not. There is the concept of a dynamic cap, which is sort of automatic based on a single criteria which does not meet all of the objectives of the city. And then there is this, which is a variable cap, where there are criteria by which the cap can increase and almost certainly will increase as long as the other important objectives that the city has to balance are in there. So what I would like to do on that is incorporate the numbers that we just talked about, but also make sure that there are some published criteria that DOT comes up with about what criteria they will be using to make these decisions, so that there is more certainty baked in here.
Yes.
So it's not a total just trust, it's a sort of trust, but there's a verify process in there.
And transparency.
Okay. So we would require the general manager to publish the criteria used to evaluate each expansion request. And as we have discussed previously, the general manager can reduce the number of vehicles if companies are in non-compliance. The compliance is going to be very, very key here because we have reached a point in some neighborhoods where we're sort of like the Congress, where there is a large population of folks who really, really love it and a large population of folks who do not, and they're in very, very hard camps. So the industry complying with the city's rules is going to be key. And on our end, we're going to have to do a very good job on enforcement. And street services and sanitation need to work out their workflow. We're going to have to ask for the report back that CD14 and Kevin asked for. And we need to get 311 involved because the permit conditions are based on a 2-hour response window, but that is reliant at the moment on the industry's self-reporting, and we need to have the ability to sort of have folks make the complaint on 311 so we know when the 2-hour window starts. So with all of that, what the recommendations would be, and don't worry, Mr. Clerk, I will give you a written copy of this, is 1, to receive and file both departments' reports. 2, to adopt dockless on-demand mobility rules and guidelines as amended to A, add a tail light requirement to safety section A on page 4. Add a California Vehicle Code definition of motorized scooters to safety section on page 4. Amend safety section, this is C, amend safety section D on page 4 to require no riding on sidewalks in 48-point or larger typeface on the platform of every scooter. D, delete fleet size section E on page 4. E, add fleet size section G on page 5 to add a for start 3,000 vehicle. Amend fleet size section H on page 5 to allow for an additional 2,500 in disadvantaged communities, any disadvantaged communities, or 5,000 in the San Fernando Valley.
Disadvantaged communities in the San Fernando
Disadvantaged
Valley.
communities in the San Fernando Valley. G, amend fleet size section I on page 5 to require the general manager to publish the criteria used to evaluate expansion permits. H, add a new fleet size section J on page 5 The general manager may reduce the permitted number of vehicles in the case of demonstrated noncompliance and/or non-performance by permittee, something I hope we do not have to invoke. I, delete, quote, failure to remove vehicles incorrectly parked within 24 hours, quote, in enforcement and termination grounds, section C. J, amend outreach and equity section A on page 10 to add, quote, disability rights organizations / centers for independent living, quote, to list of organizations to be consulted. K, amend fees section on page 10 to reflect option 1 of the DOT report. Item 3, authorize LA DOT to make technical changes to the rules and guidelines and update the Transportation Committee. 4, authorize the controller to establish a new account entitled Dockless On-Demand Mobility Program within the Permit Parking Program Revenue Fund 49C, Department 94, and authorize LA DOT to A, accept payments for permit fees and administrative costs, B, deposit those payments into a new revenue source code entitled Mobility Program within Fund 49C, and C, appropriate those deposited funds to the new account entitled Dockless On-Demand Mobility Program. Item number 5, direct the Information Technology Agency to report back in 60 days with the steps and cost estimate necessary to integrate reporting of improperly parked or inoperable devices into 311. 6, direct LA DOT to report back in 90 days with an update on the program. 7, direct Bureau of Street Surfaces and LA Sanitation to report back on enforcement procedures and staffing needs. Anything else?
The fee structure?
We did the fee structure. Yep. That was 2K, amend fees section, page 10, to reflect option 1 of the LA DOT report.
Great.
Okay? Okay. Okay, so that then would be the recommendation of the committee. And let me just say one more time, these regulations do not include a hard cap. They have a variable cap. For us in the city who really support this, there is no other option for us because we have to balance the other concerns about equity, about our ability to enforce, about maintaining the public right-of-way. This is going to be an evolving process for all of us, and we may change things significantly. And the good news is that we will be able to change them so that we can, as we have data and as we have experience, look at Venice and look at Pacoima and look at Wilmington and look at downtown and figure out different regulations for those areas if necessary. We simply can't distill the success or failure of this pilot down to one utilization number. We are not Santa Monica. We're much more diverse and we have different needs, so we have to have more than that one criteria. While it seems simple, Los Angeles is not nearly as simple as Santa Monica. And so what I ask again is that the industry and DOT begin this with trust. We are going to have to trust each other to make that work. The city has sort of got its, for lack of a better phrase, got its ass slapped by not thinking about short-term rentals in advance and not thinking about TNCs in advance. And so we want to be able to think about this as we go, as the data comes in. So we're asking the industry to phase your growth strategically and work with us so we can come up with a plan that suits the equity needs of the city of Los Angeles, and so that we can all be responsive, we, meaning the industry and the city and the elected officials, to the varying needs of our stakeholders. This is an exciting new mobility option for Los Angeles, and we want it to succeed. And if we don't strike the right balance, it won't succeed. It won't succeed for you, it won't succeed for DOT, it won't succeed for me. And we are all invested in this succeeding because we need more mobility options in Los Angeles. And so I'm committed to working to make sure that this happens right and this happens well, and I invite everybody to join us on that. So that will be the direction of the committee. You do not need to include the sermon in the report, but that will pretty much wrap it up. We are done.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, and we do have an amendment to item number 11.
Oh, yes, the clerk is being as persnickety as the city attorney. We need to do one change to item number 11. We needed to read into the record, item number 11, if you want to tell us what item it is.
Item number 11 is a resolution, Wesson Price, relative to establishing an overnight parking district to prohibit the parking of vehicles by non-residents between the hours of 2 and 6 on various streets in the district. I think the amendment was to change the boundaries.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
To include West Washington Boulevard and West Adams Boulevard from Arlington Avenue to Western Avenue, Arlington Avenue and Western Avenue from West Washington Boulevard to West Adams Boulevard, and all interior residential streets within those boundaries.
Great.
So as amended, that is approved. And we are now done, and we are adjourned.